Welcome to Childcare Rockstar Radio. I am your host, Kris Murray. Childcare leaders around the globe are breaking through challenges, leading the way in innovation, testing new best practices, and impacting children and families in a much more powerful and positive way than ever before. Each week, join me for interviews with early childhood leaders and experts that will leave you inspired to become the next childcare rockstar. Now, let's go. This is episode 121 of Childcare Rockstar Radio, featuring Stephanie Parra. Welcome back, everybody. It's Kris Murray here, and I am thrilled to have you with me today here on the podcast. I'm excited because we are in the middle of a promotional, fun time for the Childcare Success Summit. What can I say? We're kicking off tickets for our amazing fall event that we do every single year. And last year we had 1,000+ people join us in Las Vegas. And this year we are headed to Nashville, October 19th to the 22nd. And now is the time. This is super early bird. It's time to get your tickets and just go to childcaresuccesssummit.com and you can get the free buy one, get one deal, the free guest ticket that we always do at this time of year for super early bird here in March. But don't delay, because you only have until April 1st at midnight. That's Friday, April 1st at midnight to get this deal. And then you're going to lose out. If you miss it, you're going to lose out on amazing bonuses. And the BOGO may or may not be going away. I'm not going to reveal that yet. But what I do know is that you will pay hundreds of dollars more for the same exact ticket with fewer bonuses than you'll get right now. So go to childcaresuccesssummit.com, learn more about our incredible childcare conference for leaders, primarily owners and their director teams. And we have tracks. We have incredible celebrity speakers. We have industry experts and a lot of fun to be had. It's a life experience. If you've never been to a Childcare Success Summit, you owe it to yourself to come to the world's largest business conference for the ECE industry, bar none. And we attract people from all over the world that come to this show. It's an incredible experience, and you will leave transformed. That I promise you. And we actually have a guarantee on tickets. So don't delay. Go to childcaresuccesssummit.com and get in on the super early bird action before it goes away, midnight, April 1st. Today's podcast is very cool. It's something different, you guys, this time. We talked to an amazing advocate for underserved communities of families, particularly Latino, Latina community families in Phoenix, Arizona, in the state of Arizona. So Stephanie is with All In Education, and it's a nonprofit group. It's a advocacy group that serves, their mission is to focus on closing the performance gap of Latino students and the Latino community, and helping parents be more confident partners in the education process alongside teachers. So it's very, very cool. We talk about developing values-based leaders, being a daring leader and what that means. We talk all about being a change maker and standing for something in your community and trying to make a difference and actually doing it and actually seeing results and seeing she's got a little movement going in her community that she and her team basically created from scratch, all around parent advocacy, parent education and communication, and helping parents, again, be more part of the process so that we can close that gap for our children. So I think you're going to really enjoy this podcast. It's, like I said, it's a little different than I normally cover, but I think it's really important to cover all aspects of what's going on in the world of education, from policy and different ways that you can advocate and even lobby for important components in the field of education in our world. And so you can choose to utilize what you're going to learn today in any aspect of your business or your life to make a difference and be the change, which is why we titled the podcast Be the Change. And so we're going to dive right in and learn more about Stephanie and her work and how it applies to you in the early education field as a leader, and how you can take what she's doing and apply it to your specific center or school. Before we dive in, on a personal note, I'm just enjoying March. I'm enjoying spring. I'm doing some spring skiing. I've been doing a ton of traveling. And actually, as you watch this, if you're watching it live on the day that it's releasing, I'm actually sitting in Hawaii at the moment, enjoying a trip with my high-end clients, the Empire folks in Oahu, and also enjoying spring break with my daughter and other family members. So it's been a cool month of March. Lots of fun trips. I got to speak at the Utah AEYC conference. I did 3 sessions, including a keynote. And I got to go to Cancun and run a leadership retreat for my team at Child Care Success Company, which is super cool. And so much more here in March. So I am sensing a really cool vibe and energy in our world that we are coming out of COVID with a new refreshed mindset, and people are getting back to work, and we are kind of on fire across our world in early education right now. So I'm loving that, loving the energy, I'm loving the drive, and I hope you're feeling it too. And if you're not, I would like to invite you to come inside of our world for a moment and let us spend 45 minutes with you, talking to you one-on-one on a free strategy call. And there's no obligation. And we'd like to get to know you and your challenges and your issues in your business better. And it's absolutely free. So you can learn more about that and sign up for it and get registered. And I'm looking forward to learning more about you. And you can do that at childcaresuccess.com. And at the top of the page, it says free strategy call. And you just click on that button and come on in and let us help you and get to know you and give you some free tips. And we can also share with you what our coaching programs look like, if that's a fit. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick off this podcast. Let's meet Stephanie Parra, shall we? Here at Childcare Rockstar Radio, episode 121. Let's go. Welcome back to Childcare Rockstar Radio. I am your podcast host, Kris Murray, and I'm thrilled to have you. Thanks so much for taking the time, everybody, to join us today. My guest today here in the studio is Stephanie Parra. Stephanie, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Great to have you. Welcome to the podcast. Where are you right now?
I am in Phoenix, Arizona. Our organization is based here in Phoenix, and we are proudly serving folks in Maricopa, but also serve communities across the state of Arizona.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about the organization that you work for and the nature of the work that you do.
Yeah, so All in Education, we are a relatively young organization here in Arizona. We're a new education advocacy organization. We were created really to focus on closing the opportunity gaps that exist for Latino students in the state. So if you look at academic achievement of the Latino community in Arizona, we have been underperforming for about just over 2 decades and possibly longer. It was really they started reporting on it in the early 2000s. And so we continue to see a gap in academic attainment of Latinos. And so our theory of change as an organization is if we're going to close the opportunity gaps that exist for our students, we have to really focus on closing the representation gaps, and meaning that we need more Latinos and values-based leaders serving in key education policy roles and in leadership positions, folks who truly understand the community and can make decisions in the best interest of the community with our perspective at the table. So that's a little bit about what we do.
Mhm. And are there similar types of organizations in most states or more states that are more heavily populated by Latino communities?
So I think we are unique, certainly to Arizona. I have met with colleagues. We are very honored to be part of a grantee coalition, Education Leaders of Color. So there are other organizations that serve underrepresented communities across the country, but we are certainly a unique group here in the Southwest and in Arizona in particular. But you see more and more folks who are rising up and truly calling for communities to be engaged more effectively in education decision making across the state, especially where there are high populations of Latino, Black, and Native communities who often go unheard and overlooked by decision makers, unfortunately.
Mhm. And is your background more in education or is it more in policy? Kind of what do you bring in terms
Yeah.
of your background?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So I a little bit about me on the personal side. So I'm a native Arizonan. I was born and raised in Yuma, Arizona. So rural town girl, grew up in Yuma. My parents are Mexican immigrants. So I'm first generation American. They were from Sonora, Mexico. I was grew up on the southern border, typical kind of story of a Mexican immigrant family. We come through the migrant farm labor movement. So my father was in farm labor. My grandfather was a bracero in the 40s through the migrant worker labor program. And so you see a lot of Mexican families in Yuma coming through that same similar experience. But I've been in Phoenix now, about 20 years. I came up here for college and have been here since then. Unfortunately, I think for me, my call to serve the community, and in particular, I was really drawn to education after my time as a social worker. So I was a social worker for about 4 years.
Okay.
I worked with vulnerable communities. So I actually worked child crimes as a victim advocate for a couple of years. And then
Oof,
I started, yeah, that was tough.
that's
It was
tough.
tough. It was, I handled that for about 2 years of doing investigations. And then I worked with, I did training with educators on mandatory reporting of suspected abuse. And so I did that for about 2 years. And I saw the critical role that educators play in the lives of children, especially in the lives of the vulnerable children that I was advocating for. And so I actually thought at that time that I wanted to be a teacher, but I shadowed a second grade classroom and ran out of there as fast as I could. So the little guys were not for me, but I really enjoyed working with adults and adult learners. And so
Right.
my education background is actually in higher education. So I studied college students and how they succeed or don't succeed and what those
Oh, cool.
challenges are. Yeah. And it was in that experience that I really saw myself in the research. So I was doing a lot of research on first generation college students and in particular Latina first generation college students. And I started reading about the struggles of students who identified as I identified. And then I started, again, seeing myself in the research. My challenges were very similar to those students who were identified in the research. And so I thought I was going to stay in higher ed and be a practitioner there. But this is where the policy side came in. The challenges facing education. This was around 2010, 2011. The recession was going, and we were grappling with not getting resources into higher education. It's still a challenge that we're seeing, not just here in Arizona, but across the country, getting sufficient resources to schools. And so for me, I had an opportunity to go work for a national organization. And I ended up leaving higher ed to go work at Teach for America. So I was on the staff at Teach for America. And this was around, again, 2010, 2011, 2012. So around that time in Arizona, what was happening, so there was a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric happening down at the Capitol. It was around the time where legislators passed SB 1070. And so I had a moment of self-reflection of trying to figure out if I wanted to stay in Arizona. The state that is my home, the place that I love, made me feel like I was not welcome here.
Mm.
And I saw that it wasn't just me. So many of my friends left Arizona. So many of my colleagues left Arizona because they felt the same way. And so I came to this crossroads. I had a conversation with my manager at the time, and she said, you can leave because now you work at a national organization and you can go live anywhere in the country, but you can also stay here and be part of the change. And so after that conversation with her, I actually decided to run for office. In 2013, I ran for a local school board. And I got elected in 2014. I've been on the school board of Phoenix Union High School District this is my 8th year on the school board now. And so for me, it was really, we can run from our challenges, or we can decide to be leaders, and to be the change makers that our communities need.
Right.
And so that's, I think for me, that's the call to folks that we are working with in our leadership programs, is that we have to be the ones that create a better, more vibrant community for the generations that are coming up behind us. And so that's just part of my story and why I'm so committed to this work.
I love that. That's your why. It's very, very compelling.
Absolutely.
Very cool.
Thank you. Thank
I
you
love
so
it.
much. Yeah,
It reminds me of that well-known saying, be the change you want to see in the world, and that's what you're
absolutely.
doing. You're being the
Every
change.
day,
It's good.
every day. That is a quote from Gandhi where it is one that I live by. Absolutely. We have to be the change we want to see in the world.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Yeah.
Good, good, good.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about the I want to talk about leadership. I also want to talk about how this work you're doing relates to the world of childcare and early childhood education, because that's primarily the focus of obviously of this podcast, and the listenership and the viewership are primarily all leaders or business
Mhm.
owners in the early childhood space. So when it comes to leadership in early education, or
Mhm.
even the younger K through 5 of elementary education, what are some things that you are doing to try to address the gap problem that you talked about in the beginning of the podcast? Your whole mission is to focus on the performance gap and close that gap
Mhm.
for underserved communities, especially for Latino communities. So, what do we need to do? What are some initiatives that you're working on, or policies that you're trying to get pushed through? Just give us more about what we can do or how it impacts our world.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is, when I started at All in Education, I'm actually coming up on my second anniversary here. So it was April 1, 2020, which was a crazy time to leave a steady job and career and start a new
Yeah.
organization. uh, but it was really also a huge opportunity. And looking back, I think it was probably the biggest blessing in disguise for us as an organization, because what we saw it was the height of the pandemic, right? It was literally 2 weeks after schools had closed here in Arizona. And my founding board chairman and I kind of threw all of our original plans out the window and said, okay, hey, we have to really focus on listening to our community, understanding how they're navigating school closures, the challenges are with families in our community, and report back to leaders in the state on what we learn. So we launched a 4.5 week outreach campaign where we wanted to really, listen to the community, understand how they were navigating school closures, and truly just get a sense for what the barriers were, what the gaps were in their connection to schools. And unfortunately, what we heard was that there was a major breakdown in communication between schools and families, especially in the Spanish speaking community. So by the time I was on the phone with some parents in mid May, I was the first person talking to them about their child's education since mid March. So
Wow.
you can imagine, yeah, imagine what those conversations sounded like. I had parents in tears, frustrated, confused. The digital divide we knew was going to be a challenge going into the school closures. It certainly presented itself in these conversations,
Right.
but it wasn't just about access to devices. I think parents were on a spectrum, right? We had parents who told us like, "Hey, I'm actually really grateful. The school let me borrow a laptop, but guess what? I've never turned a laptop on before. There's no help desk. There's no how-to guide. There's no one I can call to help me walk through this process." And then there's those of us on the other end of the spectrum, and I put myself in this category. Those of us that thought we were tech savvy until COVID hit, and it's like everything went online, and I realized I was not as tech savvy as I thought I was.
Right.
A lot of parents were also in that category, right? And
Uh-huh.
so,
Yeah.
but overall, parents were really overwhelmed with being asked to be educators at home,
Yes.
and feeling like they weren't being given the tools or the resources or the supports to do it effectively,
Mhm.
especially parents with little ones at home. We heard a lot from parents with little ones at
Yep.
home, who felt lost in that transition.
Mhm.
Um, so taking what we heard from families, we internally brainstormed on, what can we do to meet the moment and to create an opportunity for families out of this. And so we actually conceptualized one of our foundational leadership program. It's called the Parent Educator Academy. We launched that, did a soft pilot in spring of 2021. Our initial outreach to families launched in fall of 2020. But we ended up in the spring, we teamed up with 5 schools, and we very intentionally targeted schools that had high populations of low income families, high populations of Latino, Black, and Native families, so communities of color. And we served in South Phoenix and South Yuma County. And from in those partnerships, we had an initial cohort of 30 parents.
Okay.
And from that spring cohort, we graduated 27 parents in May of 2021. Some of the early findings from that cohort, all of our parents really expressed in our focus group conversations with them, they were just so empowered at the end of it. They felt more confident in communicating with their kids' school. Overall, the message that we got from them was like, look, I just didn't know that I didn't know what I didn't know, right?
Right.
We really took the time to explain the education system to them, took the time to have them understand that the education system, with all of its good intention, does have flaws. And unfortunately, if our parents are not engaged and active and participating in their kids' education, sometimes their kids may fall through cracks that are in the
Mhm.
system, right? And so, how can parents truly be a bridge and a partner to both educators and school community to make sure that our kids get all of the resources and the supports that they need? And so again, when our parents graduated in May, they felt more confident in being that partner. And they are all some of the parents are now interested in pursuing careers in education because of the experience. But all of our parents really want to be advocates for their students. So since the spring, we have the word of the program has scaled tremendously. In the fall of 2021, we had almost 400 applications for 100 available seats. We admitted 103 parents into our fall cohort and graduated 91.
Wow.
Again, all, yeah. So maintained. What was really impressive, I keep telling my team, what was really impressive is that we maintained a 90% participation and graduation rate, even as we scaled. And we're just getting ready right now. Actually, in a couple weeks, our team is getting ready to launch our third cohort of another 120 parents. I think we'll have in this spring academy. But we're quickly scaling. Word is getting out, and this is really becoming a powerful tool for parents to further understand the education system, but
Hmm.
also to be that partner that educators need to support kids.
Right.
And that's ultimately the goal of the program, is building bridges between the schoolhouse and the home.
I love that.
Yeah.
How did you get such high engagement? What are the techniques and tools that you use to get them excited about staying connected to the program?
Yeah, great question. So we ended up, I think it was really important for us. So every cohort that we've launched, we do have agreements in place with school systems. So local districts and charter schools, we work closely. If that team has a community liaison or a parent liaison, our team works closely with them on the outreach and the engagement. And because we deployed at the height of pandemic still, we were all virtual. And one thing
Right.
that we heard from families was like, this made it more accessible and easier to participate. So I think for us, we've increased our Zoom capacity to allow us to have more than 100 folks on the line,
Yep.
but parents prefer it, right? Like it takes away the need for transportation, for
Right.
childcare, for them to participate in a school activity. And so the cool thing is we've had parents who are logging onto the Zoom as long as they learn, we kind of show them how to navigate the Zoom,
Yeah.
and remove that barrier. And they log on from doctor's offices, work, even sometimes, but they're so engaged with the content. And we ended up partnering with really great partners at TNTP, the New Teacher Project. They're a national organization that train and develop educators across the country. They do teaching fellowships. They've helped us really hone in on the curriculum,
Okay.
because one thing that we are doing, it's getting parents an understanding of the education system, but then also giving them tools on how to support their kids. So last cohort, we really focused on early literacy. And if you have young ones at home, what
Yeah.
can you do at home to increase and improve literacy for your student? And again, the reflections from the parents. One mom with the kid in fifth grade said to us, I honestly just didn't know that my kid could be in fifth grade and not be on reading level. So now I know that like I have to be really engaged in supporting his reading growth and connecting with the teacher on what we need to do, what activities I can support at home. And it is truly, I think for us, it's been really eye opening and humbling to see how much the parents want to help. They just want the tools and the supports to do it. And
Right.
so we're really excited to be building these bridges between schools and families. And that's keeping them engaged and excited.
I love that. What was the name of that national organization that helped you with the curriculum again?
TNTP.
Okay.
So it's the New Teacher Project, formally is their name, but I believe they just go by TNTP
Okay.
now.
Okay, cool. I'll definitely check them out. So, some takeaways for our listeners that you can utilize for what Stephanie's talking about and how you can apply that to your program is that she's talking about having successful communication and outreach by having parent advocates and parent webinars, parent Zoom classes. Certainly, there's got to be a bilingual element if you have a lot of Spanish speakers in your market or what have you, whatever the language component is in your particular market, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, helping your parent clients be confident partners in parenting and helping give them resources and tools and support and even quick videos on how to navigate a Zoom screen, how to use the icons or the reactions button, or how to, because a lot of people still come to Zoom and they don't know really how to use it. Um,
100%.
and so
Yeah.
I think we take that for granted now. But I was just on an HOA board meeting in my community, and half the people didn't have the capability of being able to use the reactions button. And
Right.
so for whatever reason, everybody was like, ah. So it was like complete chaos. So you have to
Yeah.
try to make sure you think of those things in advance if you're going to try to do parent classes and engagement and webinars and those kinds of things with your parent clients. I think it's a fabulous idea. I think it can
Yeah.
absolutely increase retention of clients. It can absolutely increase word of mouth for your business, and also engagement of parents
Mhm.
being the partner with the educator. That's, at the end of the day, that's the best outcome, I think, of all of this, right? Is that now you have a partnership
Absolutely.
between educator
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
parent. So I
Yeah.
love that. So our folks can use all the things that you're talking about and apply that to their
Yeah.
community and their school situation. So I love that, Stephanie.
Yeah. And
Um, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to double down on, you mentioned that we do have, it is definitely a bilingual component. So we have an English cohort and a Spanish cohort, have maintained that, and are actually seeing more engagement from Spanish speaking parents because they don't have access to these tools already. And so they are coming in very high numbers, probably like 70-30, a 70-30 split. So 70% of our cohort being Spanish speaking community and 30% being English speaking community. But there's a very high need in the market for us to make these programs accessible to them. And it's very much taking the time to, we even teach parents how to use email so that they can communicate with teachers. Here's an email, get you set up on a Gmail account. It's
Right.
free, and then walk them through that. Those things that, again, we take for granted and we don't
Yes.
think about.
Mhm.
It's that skills development. And what's cool about it too is that these are also professional development tools. So what we're seeing in our parent graduates, they're graduating with a sense of confidence in pursuing their own academic journeys and their own professional growth. Our
Mm,
parents are graduating now, enrolling themselves in English classes, community college classes. Parents are
cool.
saying, like, hey, now I think I could go get my associate's degree. Maybe I'll go finish that bachelor's degree,
Right.
because they're graduating with a new sense of confidence. So the more that folks can inspire and motivate folks to keep going, it's been a beautiful journey to see the growth of the program.
I love that. Very, very cool. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. So you have written an article about developing values-based, daring education leaders. I love the word daring. And talking about leading with values, not ego. Talk a little bit about that. What are you trying to get across when you're talking about values-based leaders, and like, kind of like, what is your dream when it comes to helping educators be better leaders?
Yeah. So I think that, when unfortunately, it's been my experience, and I know that educators probably feel this across the country. We tend to get caught up in being a political football, and get tied into the push and pull of politics. And that comes when you have groups and individuals and interest groups who come in, and have their own agendas and their own motivations. And when folks start to focus on those things and they prioritize those things over what students need, over what families need, over what educators need, that is when we start making decisions that are not in the best interests of those that we said we were going to serve. And so
Mm,
for me and for our work here at All in Education, it's really important that we have leaders who are so committed. And I think that's, when I talk to folks, I share my story. I share my personal experience and my connection to why I do this work. Because when you understand as a leader, when you understand why you're coming to the work, it's very difficult for you to compromise your values and in order to meet the interest of X special interest group, right? And so for me, knowing my why, knowing why I'm coming to this work, that I am committed to building an Arizona that is more just and more vibrant and more inclusive of folks, and truly is providing opportunity and justice to every single student that we serve. Because I know that I am willing to be a bold and daring leader in the boardroom and in any decision in this work as an executive director. We're willing to be bold and courageous and daring, and truly stay connected to our community in a way where we can be unapologetically independent and on, a voice for them.
Mhm.
And that, daring leadership matters and taking risks matters. I think when I've talked to educators over the past 12 years of doing this work, it is such a high stakes environment because a lot is on the line, right? A lot is on the line, and educators are burdened with a lot. Um, but I think that that culture and that environment also tends to make us a bit risk averse and not wanting to try new things. And so when I first became a school board member, and I would ask questions like, well, why do we do that? Why do we do that? I think like 7, 8 out of 10 times the response was, well, because that's what we've always done. And sometimes we have to ask ourselves, like, is that really the most effective way to get things done still? Or should we try something new? Should we try
Yes,
something different? And and
absolutely.
and be bold in our decisions and be daring in our approaches. Because if we keep doing, what's the definition of insanity, right? If we keep doing the same things over and
Over
over
and
again,
over again.
expecting a different result, we're going to be sitting here having the same conversation about academic outcomes and gaps in attainment in 20 years. And so
Right.
I think for me, it's about building a coalition of leaders who are willing to be bold, willing to be daring, willing to try new things, because we really do feel a sense of urgency to get outcomes for Latino students. In Arizona, we are arguing, like, we don't just have a moral imperative to support our community, we have a real economic imperative. So we are 45% of the K 12 population in the state. If you look at K 8, so the little guys, we're
Mhm.
65% of Arizona's population.
Mm.
Um, and if you look at my school district, so Phoenix Union is 90% students of color, 82% Latino, and 77% of our families qualify for free and reduced price lunch. Phoenix Union's demographics have trended 10 years ahead of the city of Phoenix and 20 years ahead of the state of Arizona.
Wow.
Arizona trends 20 years ahead of the country. So if we are, again, when I talk to business leaders and I say, hey, does it matter to you now when I tell you about these demographic trends? Their eyes are like, yes, it matters, because if in 20 years a majority of our population is low income, that's not good for the economy, right? And so
Right.
we have both a moral and economic imperative to act with urgency, to be bold and be daring. And that's the whole premise of our work, is like, hey, it's going to take all of us being daring leaders and being bold in our decisions to get better outcomes for kids.
Right. And related to that, prepping those better outcomes are kids in, preschool, pre-K, and kindergarten and after school, which are the clients that are listening and the members listening to this podcast. So, what can the early education leaders do to help support this, underserved gap? How can we be better? Do you have any ideas for us for things that we could do in our schools, our early learning programs, to be better around
Yeah.
this mission?
Yeah, it's early education is so critical, right? It is the foundation of everything. It can set a child up for success, or it can set them behind. And so I think it's important for the folks listening to think about access and how you're making your programs accessible to the community. And I think also, how are we advocating for further access at state and federal levels? Like, how are we getting more resources for early childhood education and expansion? And how are we building coalitions that say this matters? And so, how are we getting resources to make sure that communities that don't have access to early childhood education right now, because it can be a luxury in communities, right? It can be
Yep.
a luxury. So, how are we making it more accessible, and getting it to the communities that need it? And then collectively, how are we advocating together to get resources
Mm.
to expand these tools for families? Because it is such a critical foundation. And so I know, we just did a talk last week with Superintendent Hoffman, who is our state superintendent of public instruction. a leader here in Arizona who is very much committed to expanding the access to early childhood education. But it's going to take, again, a coalition of, leaders from the education sector, policymakers, to decide that this is a priority that we have to invest in. And we have to shift the folks making decisions about dollars and cents have to start viewing this as an investment in our state, as an investment in our communities, whether you're in Arizona or outside of the state or anywhere. Education is an investment, not an expense. It is not an expense on a budget, a budget line item that can
Right.
be crossed out. It has to be a critical core of a budget that stays in, that is protected, and that is continued to be invested in. And so, again, it's going to take all of us advocating for that. But yeah, it is a foundation. So I would just say it has to start with, how do we increase access?
Hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Good. I like that. And I like these ideas for parent outreach, communication, parent advocacy, and helping build confidence among parents of all groups, all colors, races,
Yeah.
underserved communities, and the like.
Yes.
So that's really, really cool. Um, where can our listeners learn more about you? And you're with All In Education. That's your organization
Mhm.
there in Arizona. Where can folks learn more about you?
Yeah. So I invite folks to visit our website, allineducation.org, for more information about our work. And I referenced some of the data sets that I mentioned. Folks can download our annual report, MAPA. So MAPA is the State of Arizona Education, Leadership, Power, and Influence. And so that is where do we sit in decision-making rooms? How are we represented, and how are our students performing? So in Arizona in particular, what the MAPA report showed this year is that while we are 45% of Arizona's K-12 student population, we are only 16% of education administrators and educators teaching workforce, and we're only 14% of state education board members. So again, there is a major gap in who is making decisions on behalf of students, whether they're making decisions in a classroom or a boardroom. And we have to work on closing that representation gap if we're going to close the opportunity gaps on the back
Mhm.
end.
Mhm.
But folks can learn more about MAPA and all of our work, again, allineducation.org. And the report is at /MAPA. So allineducation.org/MAPA.
All right. Very good. Any other final thoughts, Stephanie, before we close this
Yeah.
amazing discussion?
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure to have this conversation. I just want to say again, I can't stress enough how critical early childhood education is. It truly is the foundation. So I'm just grateful for all of the work that your listeners do every single day on behalf of students and families across the country, because it is such a critical component of our spectrum of education, and
Mhm.
truly sets up students for success. And just keep thinking about ways that you can expand your services, make it more accessible. Think about expanding access and leveraging the tools that we now have as part of daily life to do it. Like I said, it really, to us, it was about, how do we get effective outreach to parents and engage our families in meaningful ways, and truly build relationships with them where they feel like true partners in the education journey of their students. And just one final story I'll share. I think from one of our parents that has left me just in awe with the power of giving parents the tools to be advocates. So one of our parents said, she had a little one. He was like in kinder, a little guy. And in
Yeah.
the virtual classroom, he's just really shy by nature. And so in the virtual classroom, the way that would show up is when he would get called on in the group setting, he would freeze, panic, shut off computer, disengage. And so you can imagine, mom was frustrated, kid was frustrated, probably teacher was getting frustrated on the
Right.
other end of the screen, right? And so one of the tools that we told her was like, hey, create a student profile, write down all of the quirks that you think your kid's teacher needs to know about your child, and then have a conversation with her and let her know about, how she can best help your student. And so she had that conversation with the teacher. And then the next day, they tried a different approach in the virtual classroom. And it was a night and day difference. Kid lit up. He was excited to participate and engage. And so, especially with the little ones, parents can truly be partners. They can be allies and supports to the teacher in the classroom and to our education professionals. And so bringing them in as that, I think is so powerful. And we're seeing that every day in Parent Educator Academy. So just take some of these lessons and attempt to implement them on your own. Yeah.
Nice. Love it. Very
Yeah.
cool. I love that story. And that's such a common story that I've heard across our world because of what's gone on with virtual classrooms and the pandemic and surviving what we've survived. But I think we've learned a lot too,
Absolutely.
going through this. And as we get back to, I guess, education the way it used to be, my daughter's high school went back to no masks yesterday.
Hmm.
After, and she's like, Mom, I've been in a mask since halfway through my freshman year. Now she's a junior.
Oh
So
my
almost
gosh.
her whole high school life has been masked. And so I said, how did that make you feel? Like
Yeah.
it's a weird feeling. Now everybody sees my mouth and my face, and I have to make sure I don't have a frown because sometimes I have resting frown face, and I have to make sure that I don't have that. And I have to,
Oh,
so there's this, and so I think even something seemingly small like that,
mhm.
and especially for little kids, I mean, that's a high school situation,
Right.
but even imagine it's magnified so much in the impact for our littles. So,
The little ones. Yeah.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
thanks for sharing
Absolutely.
that story. Yeah, and these are great messages. I love the work that you're doing, and I am really glad that we got to bring this message to the podcast here today for everybody to learn more about you and your mission and what's going on in Arizona and applying that to the rest of the country and the world. We definitely have a global audience, so I think it'll be
Awesome.
really, really cool to have potentially an impact on communities in Canada and
Perfect.
Mexico and Italy and Belgium and the UK.
I love
You
that.
never know, Stephanie.
I love it. That's wonderful.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful getting to know you better. And again, allineducation.org and Stephanie Parra. If I could roll my R's, I'm sure I would get your name properly pronounced, but I can't. So, but thank you.
You're good.
Thank you so
You're
much for
good.
being here today. It was
Thank you
great.
for having me. So grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
Awesome. Take care, everybody. Thanks, and God bless. And we'll see you next time. Bye bye.